Does the Zelda timeline really matter? I mean, come on, just look at this mess. In hindsight, it's hard to believe that entire theories, fanfictions, and speculation of fictional historical events is constantly deliberated in this messy clutter. Just to bring perspective about this jumbled mess, we have a kingdom that is descended from people in the sky, doomed to be constantly saved by an elf in green tights. That sounds simple at first, but no. We have prequels of sequels, sequels of prequels, and entire timelines created because of this instrument. I know I might come off as a hypocrite since I talked plenty about the Zelda timeline in the past via Zelda theories, but come on, this is just ridiculous. From the massive amount of lore the Zelda series has, I have plenty of criticism to match. So in other words, I'm going to take on the Zelda timeline in a battle of wits, but I'm coming prepared to this fight. I'm joining with my battle buddies Commonwealth Realm and Zeltik to take down this tyrant.
Oh boy. Finally we get to rip this timeline apart.
Well, I've got my torches and pitchforks ready. It's time to break the timeline. To begin with, let's just start off simple. The first Legend of Zelda. This game was released in 1986 with a simple yet elegant gameplay design. And that's what the Zelda series is all about, the gameplay. The Zelda series isn't known for whatever this is, but rather the quality of the games. Anyway, the first Zelda game just exerts awesomeness. The Legend of Zelda is an adventure, immersing the player in the world of Hyrule. The story at this point is simple. Link ventures through Hyrule to save Princess Zelda. To do that, he has to collect Triforce pieces to defeat the evil Ganon.
And that was it. The timeline at this point is very straightforward. The next Zelda game, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, is a direct sequel to Zelda 1. Link from Zelda 1 eventually grew older and saved a different Zelda.
At this point in the timeline, we have Zelda 1 and the direct sequel Zelda 2. Very simple, right? Nobody would have guessed that the Zelda timeline would just take a completely different turn in the years to come. Funny thing is that the first Zelda games actually take place at the end of the timeline. Literally, the Zelda games that came afterwards are essentially a host of prequels and timeline parallels. To really give a perspective on how confusing the Zelda timeline is, let us give an overview.
The next Zelda game that came out after Zelda 2 is Link to the Past. This game is a prequel to Zelda 1 and it tells of Hyrule's backstory. That 3 goddesses created the land of Hyrule and left behind the Triforce. Whoever finds the Triforce would have their wishes come true. The Triforce was however seized by the thief Ganondorf Dragmire, and Ganon then attempted to take over Hyrule, but was stopped and sealed away by the 7 wise men.
During the game, the wizard Aghanim takes over Hyrule Castle to free Ganon. He does this by taking the life force of the 7 maidens. The 7 maidens are the descendants of the 7 wise men who sealed Ganon in the first place. Link's role in this game is to defeat Aghanim and then venture to the Dark World to rescue the 7 maidens. Once he does this, he fights Ganon.
And this is where we see the first of many pieces of retconning that the Zelda series will experience. On the back of the Link to the Past box, it explicitly says that this game is a sequel to the original NES games. However, Nintendo just retconned the whole thing and now it's a prequel. But that's not all, folks, because we're getting another prequel. The next console Zelda game release is Ocarina of Time.
In a way, Ocarina of Time could be considered a reboot of the series. A Link to the Past was released in 1991, while Ocarina was released 7 years later in 1998. When this game was in development, it was revealed that this game took place at the very beginning of the timeline. See how that turned out. Anyway, we now have 5 Zelda games at this point. Ironically, each new Zelda game is either a prequel or a sequel to a prequel, but then time travel was introduced, which made everything infinitely more complicated.
At the end of Ocarina of Time, Link defeats Ganon, then he is sent back in time by Zelda to relive his lost childhood. Okay, one problem. Apparently this makes an entire universe and causes a timeline split. One timeline split going to the adult timeline dealing with Wind Waker, the other timeline dealing with Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess. And which timeline does Link to the Past and the NES games fit in? None of the above. Apparently if Link dies in his quest in Ocarina of Time, this creates another timeline split. Okay, how in the heck are fans supposed to figure this out? In Ocarina of Time, we have a timeline split. Okay, fair enough. The game kind of alludes to it. But we have another timeline split that is not even referenced at all in any Zelda game. This essentially makes the NES games and Link to the Past revolve around a parallel universe.
Right, so Link dying in Ocarina of Time creates the downfall timeline. Okay, got ya. I've got a couple of issues with this. To believe that, we'd also have to assume that the sages in Ocarina of Time then sealed away Ganon. In A Link to the Past, however, it was said that the 7 wise men sealed away Ganon. So, are the sages and the wise men the same group? I don't know, but I'm betting it keeps some people up at night. But the main issue is this. The idea that Link dying is liable to create a canon timeline is just absurd. This essentially throws the term canon right out the window. In fact, what does canon even mean for the Zelda franchise at this point? If Link dying in Ocarina of Time creates a separate timeline, then what does that mean for all of the other Zelda games? If Link dying in his quest is liable to create a timeline, then every single Zelda game should have its own timeline with Link dying as a possibility, in which case there should be dozens of timeline splits, not just the one in Ocarina of Time.
Can you see how ridiculous the timeline is? The Zelda Timeline essentially made the first Zelda games a what-if scenario. Zelda 1, Zelda 2, and A Link to the Past are actually just a product of a hypothetical possibility in Ocarina of Time, which means that these 3 games, according to the timeline, were not supposed to happen.
And that doesn't even take into account the child and adult timelines. In Ocarina of Time, Link gets set back in time to relive his childhood, which leads us to the events of Majora's Mask and eventually Twilight Princess. On the other hand, we have the adult timeline. When Link was set back in time, the future timeline had no Link. Then Ganondorf came back to take the Triforce, only to have the goddesses flood Hyrule.
And this is where we get to the unique animal in the Zelda timeline, Four Swords Adventures. This game does not make any sense at all. I mean, how does Hyrule turn from this to this?
And that doesn't even take into account all the references taken from all the Zelda games. And what about this boss, the Helmrock King? This boss appears in Wind Waker, but then again, the game takes place in a completely different timeline.
Then things get even more complicated. Enter Minish Cap and Skyward Sword. More prequels. Minish Cap, when it came out, was alluded to be the first Zelda game in the timeline. Its geography is consistent to Ocarina of Time. And additionally, the game explains Link's outfit, like how he got his iconic green hat.
But then Skyward Sword came along and completely threw that notion right out of the window. Skyward Sword is another prequel of the Zelda series. The game reveals that the forerunners of the Hylians are the people of the sky known as Skylovkians, and the game also tells the backstory around the reincarnating process of Link and Zelda. Additionally, it also tells the backstory of the Master Sword.
But hold on, Skyward Sword showcases how the Master Sword is created, but in the official Nintendo Player's Guide to the Link to the Past, the Master Sword is created in the Imprisoning War, not in the time of Skyward Sword. So we have two conflicting explanations of the Master Sword. The Master Sword created in the course of Skyward Sword, and the Master Sword created during the Imprisoning War.
Obviously, Nintendo has retconned the whole ordeal regarding the Master Sword. And you know what? This is basically what the Zelda timeline essentially is. It's just a collection of retcon after retcon after retcon.
And what about the races of Hyrule, especially the Zora? Honestly, the gene pool of the Zora is just one big science experiment gone wrong. At first the Zora were the Parella, then the blue Zora, then the timeline split happens.
We see the Zora transform from the green Zora to the one-eyed blue Zora and finally two birds. And that's not even mentioning what in the world this is. And this whole process should take hundreds if not thousands of years of evolution. By that standard, the Zelda timeline encompasses thousands of years of history. And if that's the case, why hasn't the Kingdom of Hyrule industrialized? Magic?
The Zelda timeline, if analyzed logically, doesn't make sense. And that's the point of this video. The Zelda series isn't made to be one big epic, but rather isolated legends that emphasize one crucial mechanic.
The gameplay. The Zelda series is renowned for its unique and revolutionary gameplay. The timeline doesn't make sense because there was never supposed to be a Zelda timeline to begin with. In fact, the Zelda timeline actually hurts Zelda games. For example, take a look at this quote from Zelda producer Eiji Aonuma. It also allows us a lot of flexibility if you don't define a specific time period or location for the story to take place in.
The Zelda series takes gameplay first and story second to deliver a quality gameplay experience. Eiji Aonuma himself states that if a Zelda game is bound to a specific time period, then that Zelda game in turn would be limited. If there is no specific time period, then that allows Eiji Aonuma, along with the Zelda team, to have a much greater area of flexibility to create quality games.
And that's the whole point of the Zelda series, to make exceptional games that outlives and outshines the console they were made for.
A lot of Zelda fans take a lot of time to figure out exactly how the timeline works. But the only reason why the fans even bother trying to do this in the first place is because of how good the Zelda games actually are.
What drives the Zelda series isn't so much the backstory, but each individual experience. But what about the other games in the series? How does Link Crossbow's training, the single games, and Hyrule Warriors fit into the timeline? Not canon, right? Well, what is canon at this point? We already have a canon timeline created because of a non-canon death. Seriously, have people ever pointed out this oxymoron? We have a non-canon event, which is Link dying. dying, which causes a canon timeline. And even if Link dying is considered canon, Link succeeding is also considered canon. We have two canon conflicting endings here, and what does this say for the rest of the Zelda series? By this standard, even the Zelda CDI games could be canon for all we know. I'm only kidding, of course, don't take this seriously. I'm just trying to point out the inconsistency with the Zelda timeline. The concept of Zelda started out as a simple reference to Miyamoto's childhood, dealing with exploring Kyoto.
If there was a logical timeline to begin with, it would be easy to figure it out. The creators of the Zelda series didn't pay mind to create a Zelda timeline because it wasn't necessary.
It was fan pressure for a timeline that prompted Nintendo to release an official one, in which we have pointed out has its flaws. The Zelda series, however, was never meant to be placed together in one big story epic.
The Zelda series started out very simple. Now the franchise is massive with an equally massive cult following. The core of a Zelda game is its gameplay. If you can't enjoy the gameplay, then odds are you won't care about the story or lore. Zelda games are meant to be enjoyed individually. Wind Waker, Skyward Sword, Link to the Past, and Ocarina of Time are all individually unique.
Each Legend of Zelda game is its own individual, well, legend, not necessarily a part of one grand epic. The Zelda series originally derived from Shigeru Miyamoto's childhood of exploring Kyoto.
Zelda is the perfect combination of exploration, discovery, adventure, combat, puzzle solving, exceptional and fitting music pieces, and boss battles. The story, and thus the timeline, are probably the weakest link of the series. The Demon King kidnaps Zelda, and the hero has to rescue her and the kingdom. This story structure is pretty much used in every single Zelda game, but nobody complains because the gameplay is so damn good.
In other words, the Zelda timeline really shouldn't be taken so seriously. In all honesty, expanding this timeline with even more games does seem a bit ridiculous. In E3 2014, IG Numa gave this quote that explains this concept well. Ultimately, Link represents the player in the game. He is the vehicle. I don't want players to focus on other parts of the trailer and not specifically on the character, because the character Link represents, again, the player. The Zelda series is a phenomenal series of games, meant to immerse the player within the gameplay. And that begs the question, what will the Zelda timeline look like in another 30 years? Now that's a thought.
Well, Zelda Wii U is coming, eventually. How will the Zelda timeline be structured for that game?
Oh boy, it just never ends, does it?
Don't sweat it, I will take it over on my channel.
Well then, if you want to continue this conversation about a fictional timeline, then click here to see part 2 of the discussion over on Commonwealth Realm's channel. Also, shout out to Zeltik for being a part of this video. His channel link is in the description.
Thanks. Anyway, if you like this video, then please like, and if you really like this video, then check out our channels in the description. Anyway, have a great rest of the day, and here is the video of the day. Hey guys, I hope you liked this video. If you haven't already, then check out part 2 of our discussion. If not, then enjoy this amazing remix.